morning we're going to study one of the little known characters in the Bible. Obscure, I would say. I wonder how many of you, if I asked, and I'm not going to, could tell me the story of this guy or how to pronounce his name. That's what I'm really struggling with, is the pronunciation of his name. I've looked it up 200 times and I've got 200 different names in my head. So I don't know which one will come out this morning, but I would like to go with Barzillai, but I could come up with something else. Barzillai. Has anybody ever studied Barzillai in their whole life? Besides for Roger. I'm going to give Roger that. Besides for Roger, anybody ever studied Barzillai? Yeah, so now we're studying these characters in David's life, and as Lucas and I have said, we're about to get down to, we're really nitpicking now. We're getting down to some pretty obscure characters, and little is known about them. But as I've heard Kyle say many times, this Bible has got some pretty important real estate here, and God just didn't put stuff in here that he didn't think was important. So if God thought Barzillai was important enough to put in his word, then I think it's worthy of 30 minutes this morning. So appreciate everybody being here, and look forward to learning more about this character. His name is mentioned 3 or 4 times in the Bible, and so we'll delve into that and how this guy was very respectful of David and how he treated David, and some lessons that we can learn from that. So before we begin, Robbie, will you lead us in prayer this morning?
Sure. Let's pray. Our gracious Father in heaven, we're so thankful for this day that we can come together as fellow Christians to worship you in spirit and truth. We're so thankful that you've granted us this beautiful morning, fall colors coming in the coming weeks, and we just know that your glory and your creative spectacular ways that you create, that you do that for us. We know that all things are for us, and that we are so blessed. We know that on this day, like Christians around the world, we can celebrate your Son's death on the cross and his resurrection, and get victory over death, and we're just so grateful that we can remember that today, and we just pray that our minds focus on that. We're thankful for Mickey and Luke and their efforts with this study on David and the various people that he met in his life, and the lessons we can glean from that. We're just so thankful that you've given us that in the Old Testament, that everything in the Old Testament is for our understanding and our encouragement, and also that we may know more about you and your purpose, and we're just so thankful that you're with Kyle and the young people there, and we just pray that you're watching over them, keep them safe as they travel by this afternoon. We just give you the glory in all things. For Christ's name.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you very much. In his prayer, he talked about Kyle and the Bluegrass Youth Retreat, and I understand there's over 90 kids there. So I don't know when they started that how many they had, but over 90 is a pretty phenomenal number. So certainly good stuff being going on there. Okay, Barzillai. So let's get our Bibles and turn to 2 Samuel chapter 17. This is the first time we run into Mr. Barzillai, and we'll 1 Samuel 17 verses 27 through 29. 1 Samuel 17, 27 through 29. I'll read that. Now it happened when David had come from, there's another word that comes up that's hard, Mahanaim. When David had come to Mahanaim, that Shobi the son of Nahash, and Rabah, the people of Ammon, Maker the son of Amiel, from Lodabar, and Barzillai the Gileadite from Rajam. brought beds and basins, earthen vessels, wheat, barley, flour, parched grain and beans, lentils and parched seeds, honey and curds, sheep and cheese of the herd, for David and the people who were with him, and for David the people who were with him to eat. For they said, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. So we've got this first account of Barzillai showing up here in chapter 20, in chapter 17, verse 27. And he is one of three guys, very different folks from very different backgrounds, that show up and bring supplies to David and his men. So somebody help me, where are we at in the story? Where is David at? Why is he in Mahanaim, and what's he doing there? And what's the situation? Miss Carol, I knew you'd do it for me. Thank you.
You're welcome. He had set up his headquarters there.
Okay, so David has set up his headquarters there.
Yes, yes.
And why there? Why is he not in Jerusalem?
His son ran him out.
Okay, bad.
Absalom was trying to take over the kingdom.
So Absalom has basically taken over the kingdom, and he's run David out of Jerusalem, and he's in Mahanaim. And does anybody know? I had a map. Does anybody know where that's at?
It's near the Jabbok River.
Okay, near the Jabbok River. So is it on the east side or west side of the Jordan? So it's in Gad. It's in Gad. So it's on the east side of the Jordan River. So David has crossed the river and gone up to Mahanaim, and he set up a camp there because David's running him out. I mean, Absalom is running him out. Absalom has taken over the kingdom, and all the people of Israel are behind Absalom. So David has been banished from his kingdom and to Mahanaim, and here he is, and he's still got lots of followers with him, but from the indication here, it says the people were hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. So, pretty bad situation for David. He is, his son is, just think of that. His son is taking over the kingdom and running off, and here he is with his men, and they've been wandering through the wilderness to this town of Mahanaim, and so a very, very bad situation. Very, very, very difficult situation for David.
Well, David was fearing for his life.
David was
Along with his followers.
fearing for his life, and so he ends up here. And why do these three guys decide to? What's the connection here? Why do they get involved?
They notice that the men are hungry and weary and thirsty. That it doesn't indicate that David had reached out. It said that the men said these people are hungry and thirsty and weary, and so they were observant and noted. They saw a need and then they went to fulfill it.
Yeah, good point. These guys, doesn't say that David sent out a SOS that says, "Help us, we're starving here, we're thirsty." As Tara says, these folks saw a need, and they had the ability to help, and so they tried to help. A plus O equals R. Long time I learned that, and I use it all the time. I have the ability to help somebody, opportunity presents itself, then it's my responsibility to help. A plus O equals R. And these three guys saw that their king, evidently they were still loyal to David, which we'll talk a little bit about that. They were still loyal to David, and they brought him all kinds of provisions, even beds. And we're not talking about a few people here. We're talking about a pretty good number of people that they brought and fed. Some commentaries say this went on for a period of time, that this just wasn't a show up and feed you a one-night thing. One guy said that based on his research, this could have gone on for a couple of months. So, lots of people, lots of supplies, pretty good period of time, pretty good commitment from these guys. A very big commitment from these guys. And did they know how this was going to turn out? What if Absalom marches across the river, takes out David and all of his people that are close to him, I mean, they could have been jeopardizing their lives for sure. And, so why did they do this?
Because they were loyal to David.
They were loyal to David, and perhaps they knew David was the anointed one. David was the one that was going to,
I think it speaks to their level of faith
okay,
and understanding of what had been promised through Abraham,
okay,
promised to David,
okay,
and they believed that, and they acted on their.
okay. And then, that's a great thought. They knew what David had been promised. They knew that he was the anointed one. They knew that he was the king. And, because of their faith, they knew that, they needed to support him and help him in any way they could. So they certainly do. They bring all these provisions and, take care of David and his men. And again, I'm not sure how long it lasted, but most people think it was not just a one-time thing. Here's that they stayed and took care of these people for a period of time. So it would have been a very expensive thing. Could've,
And do you think these three men were kind of like on the rich side?
Yes.
for sure, we know for sure that Barzillai was wealthy. We know he was wealthy. The other two, if you read somebody may have done some research on the other two, but you know, there really wasn't any connection between those three guys, besides for David. There was no connection there, and they were from different towns, but they show up and they try to help. They saw a need and they tried to help. Anybody else thoughts, comments on 27 through 29?
I think it's kind of cool to see how the level, I guess the level of faith that we see in them. It wasn't just like, let's get all of our stale moldy bread and send over. You know, we'll feed them with the leftovers. But it's like a pretty extensive list of the things that they provide and things that weren't like super easy to get a hold of, and you know, making cheese and all that sort of thing. And so they really are going above and beyond to provide for them, especially if it was for any period of time.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of stuff to transport and get in there and take care of.
Yeah, going above and beyond, Jason says, that's a lot of food, a lot of things that some of it not easily obtained, and they provided it for David and for his men because they saw a need there. Okay, so that's the first time that we see this name, this Barzillai. So now let's go to 2 Samuel 19. 2 Samuel 19, and we get into this story starting in verse 31. We run across Barzillai again. So between 17 and 19, somebody tell me what's happening.
Absalom died, didn't he?
Absalom has been killed. Absalom has died. Joab has killed Absalom. You know, and David, as you remember, he mourned that, but then Joab said, you gotta get over this. You gotta lead your people. And so the people of Judah, which is the two southern tribes for sure, and some of Israel, some of the 10 northern tribes, the ones that were followers of David, they say, we gotta go get him and bring him back to Jerusalem. So that is what is taking place. They have gone to Mahanaim, and they're escorting David with all of his men back across the Jordan River back to Jerusalem. So that is kind of the where we see this where we're at in the story here. Starting in verse 31. Somebody want to read 31 through 35? Cody, you read? Thanks.
Now Barzillai, the Gileadite, had come down from Rogelim, and he went on with the king to the Jordan to escort him over the Jordan. Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old. He had provided the king with food while he stayed at Mahanaim, for he was a very wealthy man. And the king said to Barzillai, come over with me, and I will provide for you with me in Jerusalem. But Barzillai said to the king, how many years have I still to live?
we see the context here. Barzillai has followed David, and they're escorting him to the Jordan and across the Jordan and onto Jerusalem. And so here we get a little bit of a more description about who Barzillai was. So number one, we know his age. How old was he?
80.
He's 80 years old. So he was certainly getting up there in age. What do we know about his position in life?
He's wealthy.
He was wealthy. He was a wealthy man. Had come across wealth in some fashion. Anybody know how he had become wealthy? Some think. Anybody look up anybody know what his name meant? Iron, man of iron. Some think that he may have obtained the materials to make iron, and that had made one of the reasons he became wealthy. I don't know if that's a fact or not, but that is, it makes some sense. Not everybody had the ability. They were looking for swords and all those things, and they didn't have them. Perhaps this Barzillai had been able to obtain the materials to make iron, but that is what some called him that, and they thought that might be a reason for that. Anyway, very wealthy guy. He older, wealthy, and what does he say about himself? What does it mean? He says, "I cannot discern between good and bad."
Maybe he's developed dementia.
Okay.
No.
Maybe he's not. I'm not going to say that, but maybe he's not as intellectually sharp as he once was. When we get older, and I know a little bit about this, you're not as smart as you once were. You lose some things, and perhaps Barzillai understands that. I can't discern between good and bad. I'm not as smart as I once was. I'm getting older, and David, you're looking for wise consultants, and I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy anymore. I may be perhaps I was in the past, but I'm not that guy anymore.
Mickey, I look at those as his life is simple.
Okay?
Yeah. He wants to take he wants to not have any, be entrapped by wealth and this kind of, he just wants to live the simple life the rest of his days.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Carol says he's just a simple guy. He's obtained, he's got,
Yeah.
but he doesn't want to march into Jerusalem and live in the palace and all that goes on there. He wants to, what's he want to do?
He wants to live in his home and die.
Yeah, he wants to return home. He wants to return to his home, to his farm, and there is where he wants to live and where he wants to die. So, simple guy.
Maybe I think verse 35 is kind of a little hint about his mindset. He's concerned about being a burden.
Okay.
And I think we should interpret this other language in view of that.
Yes.
That it's one of those things, you've got enough on your plate, David. If I come, you're gonna have more on your plate.
Yeah.
I don't need that. I'm okay where I'm at. I can be better for you to add to your burden.
Okay.
David had great,
Yeah.
he was not having a life of ease.
Yeah. As Roger says, David is not, they're difficult right now. I mean, they're better. Absalom's taken care of, and he's marching back into Jerusalem, but he's still got a lot to do and take care of. And,
The kingdom is still divided.
yeah, kingdom's very divided, and we'll go,
Yeah.
next chapter starts talking about that. The kingdom's very divided, and,
David's got other sons.
David's got other sons that start to think they want to be king as well. And, to Roger's point, Barzillai, good man, simple man, he didn't want to be a burden. He didn't want to be a burden to David and all that he had going on. And I assume he's talking about his family as well, that they would all be in Jerusalem. And David says he'll take care of them. And Barzillai says, "Nah, I don't think that's at this stage of my life. That's not going to happen. Don't want that to happen." He says, "Can a servant taste what I eat or what I drink?" hear any longer, so he's not as sharp as he was. He doesn't hear as well as he once did, and food doesn't taste exactly like he used to remember it. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be a burden to you. I'd rather take my simple life and get back to where I'm from. Verse 36, starting, your servant will go a little way across the Jordan with the king, and why should the king repay me with such a reward? He was happy just to get to cross the Jordan with David. He thought that was a big deal. He said, that's enough. You don't owe me anything else. I would love to cross the Jordan with you and lead you, and he does that. And he says, I'll wait to Gilgal. So crossing Jordan to Gilgal is how far? Probably 2 or 3 miles anyway. So 80-year-old man crossing the Jordan, that track probably was not easy. And then following David to Gilgal before he returned. So it was a big deal. This was a major deal for this guy, and he thought it was very important. Enough that he says, that's I don't even know why you're letting me do this, David. You're really going above and beyond in his mind. Thoughts, comments?
I think this makes what happened earlier even more impressive, because it's a lot of times when people help someone else, they're looking for something in return. And this guy went above and beyond in providing for David before, and now he's like, I don't want anything.
Yeah.
And so it's just, it stands out even more to realize it was very unconditional, and he wasn't looking for what he could get out of the situation.
Okay. And as we talked about in the beginning, this real estate's here for important stuff. Why is it here? And I think Jason's, to me, is kind of the crux of it. The guy was doing a great deed for someone because they had a need, and he was not thinking at all about what am I going to get for this. I'm going to help this person, but they've got the ability to help me in a lot of ways, and I'm going to get a reward for this. He wasn't thinking in those terms at all. And we'll look at some verses later that kind of in the New Testament that says the same thing about us as Christians. We should be willing and wanting when we see a need to help others, and not expecting anything, not wanting anything. Yes, sir.
Just to add to that, I mean, it's not like this guy's in his prime and in his youthful strength and all that type of stuff. He's obviously near the end of his life because he wants to return home to die and all that. So it's just another lesson. I mean, when we're young and we're strong, we have the ability. Good, go do it. But when we're old and frail and we can't hear, you have the ability. Good, go do it.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't give up.
Yeah, great point. When does a Christian retire? No, we don't read anything in the Bible about a Christian retiring. And from the work of God, the 80-year-old, and he's provided a story here that God's put in the Word for us. So this one little story. There's so many good lessons there for us today, but certainly we see that. Anything else?
I'm gonna jump ahead.
Jump ahead, Miss Carol.
Okay, thank you. 1 Kings 2nd chapter, when David's instructing Solomon, and he tells him to remember him because he's a loyal, kind man.
Okay.
And remember his sons as well.
Okay. So we're going to go to Carol. I'm going to jump in there. But 1 Kings chapter 2 verse 7. We're going to go there in a minute. Don't go there yet. We're going to go there in a minute. And it's kind of the Paul Harvey. That's the rest of the story. Yeah. So in 2 Kings 19, and we'll finish 37 through 39. Please let your servant turn back again, that I may die in my own city. So this is Barzillai talking. Near the grave of my father and my mother. But here is your servant Chimham. Let him cross over with my lord the king, and do for him what seems good to you. And the king answered, Chimham shall cross over with me, and I will do for him what seems good to you. Now whatever you request of me, I will do for you. Then all the people went over the Jordan, And when the king had crossed over, the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned to his own place. Now the king went on to Gilgal, and Chimham went on with him, and all the people of Judah escorted the king, and also half of the people of Israel. So we see here there is a little concession, I suppose. You can't do anything for me. I'm going to return back to my town, but I do have my version says servant. Other versions say son. So I'm not sure what your version says, but it could possibly be his son. He said, I have a son. Why don't you let him go? Let him go and enjoy the things that will be in the king's palace that you're going to do for me. And David agrees to do that, and not only says, I'm going to do it, I'll do it however you want me to do it. I'll take care of him in any way that I can. Whatever seems good to you, I will do for him. And so that is a just thrown in there is something that Barzillai would like to have had done, and that happened. So he was willing, and if it was a servant, maybe it's even a better story, that he wanted his people to have an opportunity to enjoy something that he had, in a way, provided a means for them to do that. So, Jim Ham, anybody do any research on that? Do you think Roger had his son, or do you think it's a servant?
6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
That'd be 50-50, wouldn't it? Yeah.
The commentary I read was they felt like it was his son.
Felt like it was the son? Yeah.
Because in the 1 Kings 2, he said Barzillai's sons, didn't he?
Okay, so I'll let us go look there now. So let's go to First Kings chapter 2. So this is the last we see of this name, 1 Kings chapter 2. So David is giving his charge to who? Solomon, his son, saying these are the things, and Luke went through this a little bit with us on Wednesday night. These are all the things I would like to see done. And it starts out all these great things in verse 1 through 4, and then he goes through the people we'd like to see difficult times come upon. It says to both of them, I would like for their gray hairs to go to their grave not peaceably. So there's a couple of folks that he didn't say very nice things about. But right in the middle of that, in verse 7, he says, but show kindness to the sons of Barzillai the Gileadite, and let them be among those who eat at your table, for so they came to me when I fled from Absalom your brother. So in his dying days, David remembered this Barzillai. So it must have made a huge impression on him. And our writer says, it could have been a turning point in the struggle. These guys are struggling. They don't have anything to eat. They're thirsty. Somebody comes and supplies them, takes care of them, maybe for a period of time. They build their strength up, and then they're ready to take on Absalom and his crew. And we know that they do that. 20,000 they kill. So
This is God's providence.
God's providence working through Barzillai. Certainly we can see that. Just an obscure character that turns out to be a big deal in this whole story in my mind. So I think it's very interesting that we're studying people like this and the influence and all that they do to change things in a positive way, most of them. So thoughts, comments on anything there?
In that verse 7 that you just read, my Bible says, with such loyalty they met me when I fled from Absalom. And my footnote says that word for loyalty means steadfast love. So I wonder if there weren't things about Barzillai's behavior that showed, like I think it's Sam that says sometimes we need God with skin on. Like if this was, a physical representation of God somehow, and that's why it stood out in his mind so much so that he mentions it to Solomon at the end of his life.
Okay, great point. just the, there it says in verse 7, her version says, he came with steadfast love. So, just the representation of Barzillai in this picture, just made a huge impression on David and, on his life and things that were going on with him. So I wrote down some of the characteristics of Barzillai that I would like to describe, that we would all like to have somebody say about us. And, his influence. He influenced a lot of people in how he treated David and his men. His generosity. I think this Barzillai was a very generous man. He gave and didn't expect anything in return. And what a great lesson that is. His kindness, just a very, very, very kind person. And probably the most important was his devotion to God and his faith. He was very faithful. He knew the promise, and he was willing to do whatever he could to show his devotion to God and to David, who was the anointed one. So I think those are very, very, very important characteristics that he had that I wish I had more of, and I'm sure we all could use a little more of those. Let's look up a few verses that kind of go along with that. I think about verses we're all familiar with. But Proverbs, some of them are in Proverbs, talking about the good we can do and the rewards we may or may not get. Proverbs 11, and these may be, I can't remember if these were listed in our book or not. Proverbs 11:25. Proverbs 11:25. Somebody want to read that one for me?
The liberal soul shall be made fat, and he that watereth shall be watered also himself.
Okay. Roger's version said the liberal soul shall be made fat. My version said, New King James says, the generous soul will be made rich, and he who waters will be watered also. So if you are of the ability to help others in times of need, then you will be helped as well, I think is what that verse certainly tells us. Proverbs 3. Proverbs 3, 27 and 28.
Withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is the power of thy hand to do it. Say not unto thy neighbor, go and come again, and tomorrow I will give you when thou hast it by thee.
And so I think that's kind of what we've talked about. When you've got the ability to help somebody and they have a need, the power's in your hand, then you do it. And don't wait, do it immediately. Don't say to your neighbor, well, let me, as I sometimes say, let me pray about that. No, don't say that. Say, I've got it, I'll take care of it. When you have the ability to help somebody, I think we're told many times to get that done. Don't wait till tomorrow what you can take care of today. How about Hebrews 13:16? Anyone got that one already?
And do not neglect doing good and charity, for with such sacrifices God is pleased.
Okay. So, same thoughts as the others, Jason. Do not neglect to do good. You have when you have an opportunity to help someone, be a Barzillai, and go do it. Don't expect a reward. It may be a sacrifice. Hopefully, it is a sacrifice. You'll appreciate it more if you have to sacrifice. If it means something, then God is pleased with that. When we have to sacrifice and help others, then certainly God is pleased with that. There's all kinds of these verses, and they're just great, I like them all. Matthew 10. Matthew 10, verse 42. Matthew 10, 42. Somebody want to read that one?
And whoever gives one of these little ones even a cup of cold water because he is a disciple, truly I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward.
Okay, just a cup of cold water. So it doesn't have to be a big thing. Your giving, your helping doesn't have to be something that's monumental. Just a cup of cold water. If you have, if you can help someone out in a small way, and says you will by no means lose your reward. You will be. God will remember that. God will remember all those little things, and they add up. All those little things we can do for others, they add up, and we will be rewarded for doing those things by God. So, another great verse.
Mickey?
Yes, sir.
That reminds me of Jesus at the well.
Okay. And what did he say?
Huh?
And what was the thought?
Oh, you shall be blessed.
You shall be blessed. Yes. Okay. Just the small things we can do, they add up, and they can certainly make a difference. Colossians 3, 23, 24. Miss Ray, you got that one? That was Shirley I was calling on.
Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ.
Okay, so whatever you do for your fellow man, says you are serving the Lord Christ. And I think that's something we all need to think about and be aware of. Yes, ma'am.
In Ezra and Nehemiah, they talk about him being part of a family of priests.
Say again, I'm sorry.
In Ezra and Nehemiah,
Uh-huh.
they talk about this man, Bezalel, being head of the family and priest.
Okay. So in Ezra and Nehemiah, this Barzillai's name is mentioned as being from a family of priests.
Yes.
And that could possibly be true. I've read other places that name's, that's a common, not a common name because I can't say it, but it's a name.
Another one.
Do what?
Unless that's another one.
Yeah, it could be possibly be another one, but that name is mentioned another time as being from a family of priests in Ezra and Nehemiah. Also, I didn't finish that story on Chimham. Before I forget it, let's do that. Jeremiah 41:17. We see that name Chimham come up one other time. It's in Jeremiah. Remember, he's the son or the servant that's given to that David says I'll take care of. And so now we're in Jeremiah, and this is many years later. And there is a situation that comes up, and this Chimham's name shows up again. And somebody want to read that one for me? Jeremiah 41:17. You got it? Is that the right verse? Okay.
And they went on stopping at near Ruth Chimham near Bethlehem on their way to Egypt.
So that this Chimham, talk about this being a place near Bethlehem, that perhaps this is some territory that was given to Chimham by David or his folks. So this promise that I'll take care of him, and we see that perhaps being carried out, in that he was giving him and his people a place there, some land in Bethlehem. and where he evidently greeted visitors that almost a place to lodge, if you read the story. So, you know, that carried on. It carried on. The goodness of Barzillai carried on through his son, and then it was carried on further, which brings up another part of the lesson, I think, is, you know, if we're doing well and we're doing good to other people, and other people see that, then that's carried on to somebody else, could go on for generations. Just
I think Barzillai is an interesting example of kind of the paradox of honor, which is that, you know, people who go out and seek glory and honor pretty much never find it. So people who go out and seek to just do the right things, do honorable things, and to, you know, live virtuously, do find it. And there's kind of that contrast there of him and, you know, the younger David, who obviously when he went out seeking glory and honor, that's where his trouble always came. And, you know, the younger David killed Nabal and his entire, or was going to kill Nabal and his entire household over an insult. And that's maybe not what we would call honorable.
right.
And, you know, somebody like Barzillai, who seems to have lived a pretty honorable and peaceful life, and you know, even after his death, his family is honored at the king's table, and, you know, he's preserved in the scripture for generations, and so there's, you know, great honor that came to him because of the way he lived.
Yeah, that's a great point. The honor that Barzillai is given because of the way he lived. Not seeking the honor, but he got the honor. Yes, sir.
There's not a book, chapter, verse on this, but there's some that believe that the piece of land that was given to Shimnah was actually the piece of land that Mary and Joseph would have rested on, possibly even birthed Jesus on.
Wow, that's getting out there.
So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, but it was Bethlehem for sure. And yeah, so wouldn't that be a quinky to be a pog, is what it is, providence of God. Yes, sir.
Not to discount Barzillai's willingness to let David repay him somehow, and so sometimes I think we help and we don't want to expect anything in return or look like we're expecting something in return. So we say, you know, no, don't do anything for me, or, you know, but in his humility, he allowed David to fulfill an opportunity that he was able to fulfill, and if he hadn't done that, then he wouldn't have that land, he wouldn't be mentioned, if it's true what Luke said, you know. And so when allowing other people to exercise their ability about helping us, or, you know, you would be really good in this situation, you know, is there a way that you could help, and encouraging each other versus just, this whole interaction shows the give and take of being willing to give, but also willing to receive.
Okay, good point. That the give and take of David and Barzillai, and he did accept Chimham going into Jerusalem with him. It's just a great story. Where's Brad? Do the next right thing. I think that's certainly in there. You gotta do the next right thing, and who knows where that'll lead, and who that'll influence, and what God will be pleased with. So, good story, I think. Barzillai. Who knew about Barzillai? Great story. And seems like the rest of this book, we're going into some pretty obscure characters, and we got Shammah, whoever that is, on Wednesday night. Thank you.